Alrighty boys, the Mind Over Matter, Low Life, Agnostic, Doriyani's Prototype, Mahuxotl's Machination, Orb of Storm's Hierophant character I've been playing in League. So essentially, this is going to be a very quick build guide, just sort of giving you a rough outline of how the character works, all the moving parts, how they all interact with each other, the synergies, what makes this character good, what makes this character bad. Kind of just like a very brief, quick summary on this thing, because I don't want to spend too much time on it. There's a few reasons for that. The first one is, I believe Mind Over Matter at some point will be looked at, because it is a lot of defense. It's becoming more popular, which puts it on GGG's radar. So I'm going to only just do a very quick build guide on this. If it lives in another league, I might do a more in-depth one if there's a lot of interest there. But for now, the league is dead, so I'm not expecting a lot of people to play this. And the other one is this is a character that you're going to have to self-craft, and it is potentially up for nerfs next league. We'll see. At the end of the day, I would like to have this video here as just like a recommendation for people if they do want to go down this route, if they do want to try it out. It is a very fun character. I have had so much fun. This is almost the only reason I was still playing the league in the first place, was how much fun I had the more I put into this character, and just sort of making it work, learning about the Mind Over Matter, learning about the interactions with these things, playing with the defenses, and I just had a real big blast with this character, man. This character almost saved the league for me as far as I'm concerned. Like, I did not really enjoy the league. It's basically standard with one more step. There's no real, like, chase items. There was one chase item, I guess, and I don't even think it's that good. It was the gloves. And unfortunately, like, with the price tag on that and, like, how the build turned out, I was like, man, I'm pretty sure we got more damage on this build, better defenses. Like, there was ones that went glass cannon and got a little bit more. Anyway, the point is that this build was very fun. And I really do recommend this to people. I do recommend it for moderate to advanced players, because there is going to be a lot of self-crafting involved. So I'll just give you all the info, and it's up for you to decide whether you want to make this character work or not. I'll try and give you as much advice as I can. But the centerpiece of the build is a Doriyani's Prototype, which essentially makes enemies' resistances match that of your own in a large aura around you. Could be 80 or 90 units, I believe someone said, but it's virtually screen wide. So if they're on your screen, and they're not all the way over here, they should have whatever your resistance is. How we utilize this is by going negative resistances ourselves, right? So we don't get lightning resistance. We get a little bit here and there, but like not on any of the gear. I think it's just from the tree. And what we want to do is get our resistance as low as possible, and then we want to penetrate the rest. So this ends up giving us, I think it was like 180% pen. We even have a pen gem and stuff like that. We have a crazy amount of penetration on this build. I would like to take it a little bit further, but where we are right now gives us a lot of damage. Now, the good thing about this chest piece over anything else is that this is permanent. This is unbelievably consistent. So basically, because this sets their resistance at us, it doesn't matter how much res they have. So essentially, you could have 1000 overcap res. Doesn't matter, I'm going to minus it down. We have a boss, like, Minotaur or Shaper or anything like that. It still sets their resistance at ours. Because normally when you try and lower res on a boss, you're doing it through a curse. And a curse, unfortunately, is 66% reduced. Therefore, it's not good. Even when you use 2 curses, you can only take like 40 res off of a boss. And then the rest of it's penetration, which is why penetration works better on bosses than minus res does. I don't want to go too in-depth on that, but the long story short is that by setting the enemy res at this, it's unbelievably consistent for damage. So it doesn't really matter what their res is. We're always going to have the same amount of penetration. Very consistent. Very solid damage. The drawback is obviously now you're running around with minus res. Now the chest piece is going to lead you to believe that, if you get more armor, you'll take less lightning damage, and that's how you counteract the downside to this build. That was true up until this league, thanks to the introduction of this shield, the Mahuxotl's Machination. Now, the Machination shield itself isn't very, it's basically called the Keystone shield. There's nothing really too unique about it. We've seen all of these, keystones before. We know what most of them do. Basically, this thing's going to give you a bit of overleech. It's going to give you Vile Pact, so it makes your leech more effective. It's going to give you Divine Flesh, which is the biggest one, and the other keystones don't really matter in this particular case. But what I want you to focus on is the Divine Flesh here. So, essentially, the answer to taking lightning damage, or lightning resistance, and being on negative, is to convert all the damage you would take that's lightning into something else. The Mahuxotl's Machination does this by giving us Divine Flesh on a keystone, not on our tree. So the big deal about this, right, is normally when you want Divine Flesh, and I use it on many of my builds, the point is you have to use up a timeless jewel slot. Can't pair it with anything else. From Divine Flesh being on this shield, it allows us to use a different timeless jewel like tempered by war. We've seen this in Zizarin's video at the start of the league. Even he said it was one of the most tanky characters he's ever played. I don't even think he utilized it as much as we have. Because what we have here is Rakiatas, Lethal Pride. It gives us tempered by war. And what this does, right, is gives us cold and lightning damage taken as fire, 50%. Right? You pair that with Divine Flesh. Divine Flesh is 50% of elemental damage taken as chaos. So essentially what happens here is 50% of it's taken as chaos, and the other 50% of cold and lightning is taken as fire. So when it comes to cold and lightning, when it comes to cold and lightning, we're essentially fully elemental converted into chaos and fire. So the only elemental damage we take is fire. And then the other part we take is chaos, and then we stack massive amounts of chaos resistance. So 5% of it comes from the Divine Flesh itself. It gives us an extra 5 chaos res. And then what we do is we stack 3 Born of Chaos clusters. Oops. I remember the buttons. Stack 3 of these Born of Chaos gems. Clusters. Small clusters. And that ends up giving us 89 maximum chaos resistance. This makes us extremely elemental resistant. So whenever we get hit with like cold, it gets converted between fire and chaos. Chaos virtually takes nothing. Fire takes 75% reduced. We don't take a lot of damage there. So basically we're mitigating the damage by a lot. Maximum resistance is very, very powerful in this game. We can take this further if I got a all res roll anywhere on some of the gear. Currently we don't have it. That's fine. We'll live without it for now. It's a goal we want further down the track. But for now, basically we have 89 chaos res. We don't take virtually any chaos damage. We don't take a lot of elemental damage. That's the interaction between the chest piece and the shield right there. So that's how we get all of our elemental res. It's how we counteract the downside of the thing, of the chest piece, leaving pretty much only physical damage to take, right? How do we mitigate all the physical mitigation then, right? Because obviously we're still physical damage resistant. We don't have much there. Well, if we look on our tree, we do have a lot of armor in our gear, because obviously this is an armor chest piece, armor helmet, armor shield. We don't even really have this min-max. It gives you about, I think, 16% overall, just from the default armor you have. And then you get another further 16 from the 4 endurance charges you stack from Conviction of Power. So we have permanent 4 minimum endurance charges. These never go away. There's no map mod that's going to get rid of them or anything like that. They're never going to drop off. So we have, I think, another 16%. Pretty much totaling us to 32% baseline physical damage reduction. That's pretty good on its own, right? Because that's, 16% of that is raw, and then the other one's the regular armor type, which is not great. Then when we pop, when we pop both of our flask, we go up to 66, and yet again, Basalt is straight up reduction, endurance charge is straight up reduction, armor is a little bit on the iffy side. If you guys know anything about armor, we don't want to go into that too much. But the long story short is we've got at least 66% reduction right there. The additional reduction comes from the fact that we have physical damage taken as fire and chaos. We have 10 on the helm. We have 8 on the shield right now. Now, you can actually get another roll of this, which could take you up to 16, and it would always be physical damage taken as fire. So one thing I want to mention here is when it comes to conversion, when you're converting physical damage taken as anything, the conversion only happens once. So if you were to get a physical damage taken as cold, it's actually going to be taken as cold. It's not going to be taken as cold and then convert thanks to our elemental conversion layer. It's only going to be taken once as physical damage taken. So when you do the conversion, it only happens once. So what I'm trying to say here is basically, if you get physical damage taken as lightning and you have negative lightning res, you're actually going to end up taking more damage than the physical hit would have had originally. So you can only accept physical damage taken as chaos or fire, okay? Which is the reason why we use this helm right here. So no matter what you guys do, just remember, physical damage taken as fire or chaos. Those are the only 2 acceptable modifiers on this build. Otherwise, you will take increased damage from physical, which we don't want. But in total, you can end up getting, I think it's 29% of physical damage. So we get an elevated mod on this, and we get another 8 here. That's another 11. That would put you up to 29% of elemental damage taken. As physical damage taken as elemental or chaos, whatever you want to call it, right? Would make us a lot more tanky against physical damage. But for now, we've got raw physical mitigation, and we've got 18% conversion. That's been more than enough to face tank, nearly every single hit in the game. It's really good. We want to eventually min-max this. It would be fantastic. But for now, that's all we're going to need to sort of go over. Right, so we're elemental damage resistant, we're chaos damage resistant, and now we're mostly physical damage resistant. Physical is probably our weakest layer. We can make this a lot better. I look forward to seeing how much damage we could take if we had these other few rolls. But for now, that's fine. Alrighty, so that's our defensive layer, our consistent offensive layer, thanks to this. Pretty much leaving us to only go over one more thing, right? Which is our Petrified Blood. Now I'm going to try and give you the most butchered, quick summary of this I can. A regular Petrified Blood gem, right? Essentially makes your effective HP 85% effective. So if you were taking a 2k damage shot, it's the equivalent of dying at 1600, right, for overleech. So even though this thing makes you weaker, what it would do is if you survive that, you would technically take less damage overall. So it heightens your one-shot potential, right? So you're more vulnerable to one-shots, but you're more survivable. You've got more survivability over a 4-second period, provided you have the regen to counteract the degen on this gem. That's the way of looking at a regular Petrified Blood. Because what it is if you have a regular one, you would take less damage overall, but you're more vulnerable to one-shots. That's pretty much the summary on that one. When you use an anomalous, right, you have nearly, okay, so it's still better to have a pure life pool, but you have nearly the same one-shot potential as if you had a full life pool. But you then take extreme degen. So if you can counteract the degen and you have a similar one-shot potential, this ends up being a better gem. Now, the only reason to use Petrified Blood is, like I said, if you've got spare, life to spare, or you need to reserve an aura there or anything like that, right? But essentially, it's to put you on low life. Low life is to get us extra damage, and it's to make Agnostic more, how to describe this, more effective. Because when you're using Agnostic, right, the amount of health it's giving you back is always the same, right? It's, you're going to give up 20% of your mana to recover that much as life. You have a lot of mana, which means you gain that much life. The life percentage is already set off your mana, right? Sorry, I think it's set at 20% or something. So what we end up regenning here, I believe, is about 2,400 per second. Yeah, about 2,400 per second, but my life pool is only 1.6. That literally means in a single individual second, I'm actually regenning double my life. Now that's just basically permanent. The drawback to this, though, right, is because I'm not reaching full life and I'm using Petrified Blood, if I'm never reaching my full life, I'm constantly draining my mana. Constantly draining that Agnostic. But as you can see, that doesn't appear to be the case because my mana isn't really dropping. Now, if I put on my Righteous Fire right now, I would start to very, very slowly degen. And you can counteract this, so I will show you this. I may as well. So this is a final defensive layer you're going to go over. And we will go over this in a second, but essentially, if I put this thing on, right, I'm going to start to slowly degen. This is like a minor inconvenience, but no problem. It's instantly counteracted by having a permanent Arcane Surge. My Arcane Surge lasts a long time. I'll go over this in a second. But essentially, so long as I'm moving, I'll never actually feel this degen. But for people that are worried, oh, but man, what if I AFK, come back, and then I've got no mana? Well, one, your Arcane Cloak's always going to give it back to you. But this can also be counteracted with just a small amount more recovery. Like, I currently don't have recovery here. You could get more mana regen. There's a lot of ways to get more mana recovery, but I've opted for a bit of a different setup. But if you want to counteract it, put in a recovery rate, you're always going to recover, and then God forbid you move and activate your Arcane Cloak, and then you're back at full anyway. But while Arcane Surge is up, which is permanently, as long as you're moving, this is never an issue. Like, actually never an issue. You can get enough recovery even without getting it on the boots. If you want more recovery, you can just get it through the boots. I'm going to eventually have a Perfect Watcher's Eye. I've actually already purchased this on standard. So what you want, though, is you do want the extra 10% of damage taken from mana, because our mana is virtually infinite. Right? Your mana is virtually infinite. Most MoM characters have more mana than they know what to do with at the end of the day. So what we want to do is pretty much capitalize on that and actually make it so that we're out regenning the degen of being Agnostic, but we want to have a low enough life pool to be low life, and then we want to counteract the downside of being low life and Petrified Blood by having a crazy mana regen pool. So basically, they both interact with each other. So we over-sustain our mana thanks to just being an MoM character. By being Agnostic, we have a crazy amount of life regen that we're not utilizing. That allows us to go on low life and then counteract the downside of being Petrified Blood, which is the degen. So now we're degen resistant, which is one of the problems of the build. All except one, by the way. But we're also resistant to elemental, which is why when you see us tanking the Shaper Beam, we're virtually taking no damage. So we're super regen heavy, and we're not even done with all of our regen layers yet. But essentially, everything counteracts everything in the build. It's a really weak combo. I probably butchered that. But the long story short is an Anomalous will make you take similar one-shot potential, but give you more degen. We counteract the degen by having a crazy amount of mana regen to give us Agnostic, and Agnostic will take care of the defensive layer. Basically, in this particular build, we get low life at virtually no penalty. That's the TLDR, right? There's virtually no penalty. We can grab Pain Attunement for free. It's in an excellent spot on the tree. It allows us to use a another Thread of Hope, which gives you negative res. Yet again, we don't care about negative res so much, aside from fire. It's great. It's just a really great combo overall. All the gems and all the links you guys can just grab off the POB if you guys don't want to know about all this stuff. But the TLDR is pretty much, that's how these three synergize. It's how your Petrified Blood synergizes with your shield synergizes with your Doriyani's prototype. They all work together. How you get permanent uptime on your Arcane Cloak, by the way, I really do recommend everyone just has this set to their left click. Arcane Cloak is amazing. You want it up as much as possible. It's got a very short downtime, which is why in the POB, I do, yet again, the POB is min-maxed gear, just for reference, right? It's gear I would like to possess in the perfect scenario. So if I could, right, I would want cooldown recovery. And you can actually, if your gear was crazy enough, get your fire res cap, get your chaos res cap. Like, this is perfect gear. It's gear I currently don't possess, right? I've got okay-ish gear. But the TLDR right here is, this is what the build is capable of in the endgame. If you want, check out my profile for what I actually have. And then just be realistic about the gear you can currently possess. But more life recovery rate would be insane, and obviously, much better life rolls. It would give me more life overall. A better mana roll would be awesome. Like, there's so many things I would want that we're just not going to get, or we're not going to get anytime soon, that I'm not worried about just yet. But if I could, I would have cooldown recovery here. What I recommend you guys get is actually, chaos and fire res. I do have enough chaos res on the build, but obviously in an ideal world, I would prefer a recovery rate here. And a cooldown recovery, because the downtime on Arcane Cloak is essentially the only weakness. It's 3.5 seconds. You can get this down to 2.5, and then that's just 1 second more where you're virtually untouchable. When Arcane Cloak is up, you're very unlikely to die. This is, in my opinion, the most likely layer to get nerfed in the future. I don't want to say it's overtuned, but it's so powerful by comparison to other guard skills. I imagine that they will touch this, and this will be one of the things that sort of just dials back how OP Thingo is. Anyway, Divergent Arcane Cloak just gets you a little bit of extra buff effect. You do pair this with a Divergent Arcane Surge, because obviously it gives you an extra 2 seconds. It can give you an extra 2.3 in the end, which is insane. You pair that with an increased duration, and this is virtually, it's like a 14-second uptime on your Arcane Surge. This can actually go a bit higher too. But by the time Arcane Cloak comes back up, my Arcane Surge is actually not done. You will not ever run out of Arcane Surge. This basically gives you permanent uptime on your ailment immunity thanks to your ascendancy. So while you have Arcane Surge, you have ailment immunity, you have leech. It's really, really strong. You want permanent Arcane Surge, and you do want a level 20 because it's the most effective version of it, right? You don't want the one that just comes up by default. That's actually a level 1. It's kind of weak. It also gives you a bunch of cast speed, which we'll also go into. So this is the last thing I'm going to need to explain to you. I might very briefly touch on crafting, but we've gone over, your Arcane Cloak setup, which is allocated to your left click, the TLDR, use the Divergent. You can still just use your regular Arcane Cloak at the start. You want a Divergent in the end. The higher the better. You want increased duration because you want it up permanently. You do want an enhanced to make this buff effect a little bit better, because I can't even remember if there's actually a better gem you can get here. We might swap it up one day. For now, I'm happy with enhanced because obviously we get more damage out of it. Damage is, good. We want damage. It gives us enough defense by default. It's amazing. The long story short is you can also counteract the degen. I do have a Perfect Watcher's Eye on standard that I'm going to put on this character. That should cover everything. We do run a permanent Righteous Fire, but like I said, for the purpose of the video, I turned it off. We do run Anomalous Wrath and Divergent Righteous Fire with an Enhance. I've seen a lot of people talking about using an Empower. It's slightly less damage. It doesn't really matter, but the Enhance is cheaper, so I would just go down the Enhance route. It's actually better for both of these. This is the setup I've chosen. You can do a Shield Charge Fortify. I don't really need the defense, so I don't really worry about it, because it's kind of fiddly, you know what I mean? Like every 4 seconds you've got to charge to keep this Fortify up. You can use it if you want, guys. You really can. You can use a Vigilant Strike as well if you want to lose a gem slot. I don't think it's worth it. Our defenses are great. It's up to you guys whether you want to use that or not. But by all means, you can definitely go for it. Anyway, a couple of things I want to go over. You do want dexterity on one of your rings, preferably a tier 1 roll. That is so that you can use an awakened chain. Right? The awakened chain basically just helps with map clear. Doesn't do anything for bossing. Anomalous Orb of Storms, because you get 2 extra beams. This just basically means more clear overall. It's the more monsters you can chain to with more chains. You do want that. Ooh, pardon me, by the way. I know that someone was going on about like frequency rate. The frequency rate comes off your Tempest Shield. I currently don't have a lot of them. But yeah, the last big mechanic I want to go over, right? Probably one of the more important ones is how your single target works. So essentially, your Orb of Storms on its own doesn't actually shock that frequently, right? Like, it's got a little frequency that comes out about every 0.8 seconds, right? So even though we're pairing this with like a big arcane cloak, we put it down, it's got a big mana cost on it, we end up with, 430 damage. It's a little bit more, obviously, because we have Righteous Fire up. The problem about this is, on its own, like, this will clear a map. This will kill whites and rares and stuff like that, no problem, right? Like, that alone is going to clear maps for you. The problem then is, like, anything that's got a decent health pool. And essentially, this thing only attacks every 0.8 seconds, so like once a second. It's not a lot. That's like 1, 2, 3. It won't get off that many attacks. So even though it's got a really good damage, it's not very effective against high HP bosses. So what you do is, you pair it with a lightning skill. So every time you cast a lightning skill, right, it'll actually chain to the Orb of Storms, and then the Orb of Storms will chain off and then hit the enemy an additional time. So it basically ups the frequency, and it goes off your cast speed on this. We pair this with a Tempest Shield, which casts every 0.13 seconds, essentially going from 1 cast a second, just about, roughly, right? We're just going to be a little bit cynical about this, to, I believe it is about 7 casts per second. So rather than have 1 Orb of Storms, I've got 7 casts going off per second, right? So it's my damage times 7. And I'll explain how we do this in the POB, but that's the first step we take, right? That's going to increase your damage. The second step is by the fact that we chain off of this, and there's multiple beams. Now, you don't need the anomalous one, but if you put a Hydrosphere up here, it will actually chain to the Hydrosphere as well. So you're the conductor, the Hydrosphere also is a conductor, and essentially whenever I hit this, it's also going to chain off to this, and then it's going to bounce off and hit the enemy as well. And the Orb of Storms will also hit the enemy, right? What that means is we go from 1 Orb of Storms to an Orb of Storms and a Hydrosphere that are both hitting the enemy, effectively doubling your damage. Because it comes off of this, chains off of this, hits the enemy. The other one comes off the Orb of Storms and hits the enemy. We're effectively doubling our damage here when we do this. It's a chain mechanic, bouncing another damage source off Hydrosphere. It's very, very important that you understand that how you get single target on this build is, if you just need a little bit, you just put down your Orb of Storms and you do a Tempest Shield. It's going to shock all the enemies 7 times instead of once. Very effective. Jesus Christ, that had to happen in a recording. And then the other one is when you really, really want single target, you put down your Orb of Storms, you put down your Hydrosphere, and then you're going to double your damage again, and then you're going to do 7 casts per second. Now, in POB, if you guys ever want to calculate your damage, what you're going to do is... Why in the middle of recording? I don't know if you guys can hear that. Bloody washing machine's going off. Essentially, what you do is we come in here. This is your overall damage, about 12 mil in like a min-max scenario. Very consistent 12 mil though, right? Like not weak against map mods. But you go to your skills, you go to your Orb of Storms. Now I only have this set to 6. You can actually set this to 7. Why is it 7 technically? Well, like I said, it goes off your Tempest Shield cast rate. Your Tempest Shield cast rate is 1.3. Go to a calculator. Right, so like I said, my Orb of Storms is only going to bounce off this. So it's my Orb of Storms damage times 7. Right, so how many times does it go in there? We have 1 second as our cast time. We divide that by the 0.13. We get 7.6 casts per second or whatever. In the final POB, if we could get better gloves, this would be up to 10. I don't want to ramble too much, but the long story short is you have 7 casts per second. So it's your damage, then times by 2. Now, POB already knows how to do this. So what it does is it adds the Hydrosphere and the chain. So that's my original damage, 900 something K. If I had my Righteous Fire, you see it's quite accurate. And then it's times 2 because of the Hydrosphere, and then it adds the Hydrosphere damage on there, which is what's going on here, because the game understands that we're bouncing off the Hydrosphere, right? So it's your Orb of Storms plus your Hydrosphere times 7, and that's your DPS. That's how you work it out. So you come up here, you give it a count of 7 because that's how many you're casting per second. POB can't do this on its own, but that's pretty much the TLDR right there, guys. And eventually, in the final POB, in this POB, if we were checking out Tempest Shields, technically I would be able to get 10. But this also means, by the way, guys, that so that's cast per second, right? This is in a min-maxed version. That is if I had an Essence Craft fingerless silk gloves. Yet again, I don't have this, but you could essentially hit 10 casts per second instead of 7 because it's 16% more cast speed. Cast speed is incredibly important, guys. So when you see a faster casting on a Tempest Shield, know this, that is actually your damage. It's a combination of skills that are giving you a single target here. So there's your cast rate, there's your faster casting. If I was to take off the faster casting, I would obviously have less Tempest Shield, which is less cast per second. So the TLDR right there is you do want cast speed on your Tempest Shield. It's super effective for getting out extra cast per second. Extra cast is straight up your damage times 2. We're going to have to ignore that. But I think I've explained all the interactions there. That's how you get single target. That's how you get the gear. Like a very quick overview on how we crafted literally nearly every single piece of gear. Now, I just bought the suffixes outright. So I believe this one originally had lightning res. I changed lightning to fire. We only want fire res. We only want chaos res. I have one cold res on here, and that's because it wasn't a chaos res. And yet again, we have to self-craft these. Pretty much, I got the suffixes I wanted. I want mana regen, 2 res rolls, and then the prefixes, I reforge life with suffixes cannot be changed until I hit T1 life, and then I Ashland craft the mana on there. That's literally it. That's how I did it. Both of these rings have been done for, like this one here was crazy cheap. I got it first go. Also, we did reforge caster. So I bought the ring base for like 2x off this guy with the suffixes that were already perfect. The dex roll yet again is for your awakened chain. And then I reforge caster because I did want cast speed. This is for min-max damage because yet again the life roll doesn't matter too much to me. I prefer mana and a spell damage roll. Increased damage is super effective when you're using Archmage because Archmage gives you a tremendous amount of flat, which is why we want increased damage on the chest piece instead of plus levels. Side note, you can just keep that in your back pocket. But the long story short is pretty much it's get your suffixes done, then just do reforge to get either life or a cast damage roll, a caster roll, and then try and get your Ashland craft. Ideally, you would get mana and mana recouped, damage recouped as mana over time. That would be insane for regen. But that's pretty much the TLDR of like most of the crafting. You're going to fossil spam nearly all of your crafts. So what it is even when we were doing this, right, it was Lucent Fossil and Aberrant Fossil, right? Because we want a Chaos roll, we would like another Res roll. I mean, this helm is perfect, by the way. I will go a little bit in depth on how I did the helm. The helm was pretty important. But basically, everything else is just get a Chaos Res roll. If you can, get another, Fire roll, any Elemental roll that's high enough. Get a Mana Regen roll, and then just do your prefixes. You can do this by spamming Aberrant with Lucent. You get most of what you want there. You can do Aberrant plus another element to get what you want and hope you get Mana Regen. I like the Mana Regen's more important. You can also do Reforge Chaos with an open suffix. Yet again, that'll just give you a chance, like a 1 in 6 of getting a tier 1 Chaos roll. I still recommend you just buy these outright. There's a lot of crafting methods you can do, guys. Hopefully you're a more advanced player. If you need help, you can come over to the stream and I'll help you out there. But for now, all you need... Oh, by the way, you do need mana recovery on this thing. It's the same crafting method. Everything is virtually the same crafting method. It's a Lucent Fossil, or it's a Lucent Fossil with an Aberrant Fossil. You spam until you get something like this. You fix up the prefixes. Really not that hard. We do want... Alright, we do want Unnerved on the build. Culling Strike is a bonus. Yet again, you might just be able to buy these outright. It's up to you guys. Just make sure you don't have a Lightning Res on there. Lightning Res is detrimental to the build. Best base you can get is an Archdemon Crown. This is only for like minus res. The minus res is just a little bit nice. Petrified Blood has reservation. I literally just paid a lab runner. It was 8 exalts to get this, right? So I bought a base for I believe 2x because it's eye level 85. I then gave a lab runner 8 exalts to go get me my helm enchant. It's not a very expensive one because it's obviously underrated. It basically allows us to get enough reserve to make our life pool more decent. So we're over the cap by a large amount. We then basically literally we just I think I just Lucent Fossil spam this and I actually got that like insanely quick. We were very lucky. Then I do Reforge Fire with suffixes cannot be changed, and that gives me physical damage taken as fire. The only prefix you can hit is physical damage from fire taken, physical damage from hits taken as fire. So you can just spam this indefinitely. So what I did was just I reforged it, hit physical damage as fire, like straight away. I think we did it twice maybe, so it cost me like 4x. And then I just divined it to perfect, and then went and did an Ashling craft and got this first go, and then just rolled life on it. Unbelievably easy to get this. And yeah, you just want the Helm enchant, you want the base, suffixes or whatever. You do want mana regen there, because if you don't get it there, you have to put it on the boots. You can get more recovery rate. I've already rambled about this enough, guys. This is a 30-minute guide for something I was just trying to very briefly go over. But the long story short is, everything's been self-crafted. The POB there is my fantasy of what I would like to have. This build can do absolutely everything. It's super tanky. It's super fun. It was a lot of fun making all this gear. These all alter in price, but you can just look at all this stuff, try and buy it yourself, try and make it yourself. Like I said, there's not a lot of people playing this. I think there's like 10 people in total, something like that, or at least 10 people that are listed. This is how we min-maxed it a little bit in the league. It actually didn't cost that much. Even this thing here I got for 1x, man, because people just don't know what they're looking at these days. This is incredibly good find, this one. I think we can make this even better. But if you guys want to play this, I really, really do recommend it. It was so much fun. It's such a reliable build. It's really good in all scenarios because you're not taking elemental damage like you normally would. Because it's conversion, you're not taking penetration. You're always guaranteed to like lower their lightning res, so you're not weak against monsters with higher res or elemental equilibrium. So it's just very consistent and very solid at what it does. When your Arcane Cloak is up, you can pretty much tank everything in the game outside of, I believe, the Maven Explosion. We have even tanked the Phoenix Explosion with extra damage mod, which is crazy. Like, we've still got more layers to go as well. I mean, obviously, that would be just crazy to get the final few layers on this thing. But for now, I'm super happy with where the build is. I've given you guys a rough overview on how you get the crafting. The rest of it's uniques. The rest of it's just regular gems that you can just find in the game. So we just, corrupt these. It's a healthy mine. There's nothing special about it. Very quickly, my favorite Watcher's Eye is a, we call it, one of these. Damage taken from mana before life. I like this more than recovery. If you could get both, you've got yourself the ultimate tanky character. Lightning damage increased is actually super strong because we're Archmage. Yet again, when you're Archmage, you already get a tremendous amount of flat damage, so flat damage is less effective. Don't go for plus levels, go for pen, or go for increased. Those are, in my opinion, your only two options, right? So increased is not actually bad on this build. It's really strong. But again, damage taken from mana before life is more effective on this build than any other one, because we want to take as much damage off the small life pool we have to this one. But as you've seen, that small life pool is super effective. Anyway, guys, I've rambled on for 30 minutes. I think I've explained absolutely everything you should need to know about the build. I've gone into like the little fiddly parts. I'm going to stop rambling. Thanks for watching. Peace out. I'll catch you guys all later.